Thank you everyone for being here today. And so, I'm Brent Sellers. I'm the extension weed specialist here at the center and also the center director. We're always battling something new, it seems like, but this is another species that isn't here in South Florida so far, thankfully, but my colleagues up in North Central Florida, Levy County, Alachua County especially, have been battling this species for a little bit. We didn't know much about it. Thankfully, there's been some work done out west. So we've had a little bit of information to go on to start some initial trials here in Florida. And so that is where we started today. But just to give you some background, invasive plants in Florida, there's about 1,400 different species, and we've now added another one. Invasive plants cost the ag industry in Florida about 179 million. And the state of Florida spends about 45 million a year on conservation areas alone. So we have a lot of species, but we're trying to also prevent that as much as we can, but they are getting ahead of us. And just background, this is a picture of a pasture in Union County where in the spring, we didn't think the Australian beardgrass was that bad. And then we saw it flower. So we learned a lot this past year, not thinking it was horrible, but it sure looks more and more like it could be, just like other species that we're currently dealing with in Florida throughout the state, which includes smutgrass and cotton grass. So I'm going to turn this over to Tenzy. Tenzy is my postdoc in my lab. She's been with me almost 2 years now. And I'm glad she's here. She's been great for my program, and I'd like to give her all the opportunities I can to expand her horizons, as today is one of those opportunities. So Tenzy, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Demnot Felobesut from Ngobe, but I go by Tenzy. I am originally from Eswatini, formerly Swaziland, where I graduated with a bachelor's in agronomy and a master's degree in crop science from the University of Eswatini. Then I moved to South Africa, where I also obtained my PhD in agronomy from Stellenbosch University. Later on, I moved to the Range Cattle Research and Education Center to work with Dr. Sellers on pasture and rangeland weed management. I would like to welcome you all to our talk today on controlling Australian beardgrass in Florida pastures. And Dr. Sellers has done a great introduction of where we are coming from. We hope that today's discussion is going to provide direction on where we could be heading to. As Dr. Sellers has introduced some of the invasive species that we are working with in the lab, we have smutgrass, which reproduces mainly by seeds. Each plant is capable of producing more than 45,000 seeds. And imagine if you have 1,000 or 10,000 plants in your field, you are going to have a full coverage of the species. And Dr. Sellers has been working on smutgrass for quite some time. And every time he believes that he has found a solution, he discovers that smutgrass is actually 10 steps ahead of him. So, and it gives him sleepless nights. And then when he wakes up in the morning, he wakes up to cotton grass. This is a picture that I took yesterday. In fact, I took both of them yesterday. And the one on the left, I took it on 62, just off US 17 road on 62 West. And then this one, I took it on County Road 663 when you drive northwards, just before you join 62. Cotton grass is also an invasive species that is invading rangelands, pastures, roadsides, and other undisturbed or uncultivated land in Florida, and it has become quite invasive. We do have a project working on cotton grass that is trying to control the species, but this time around, we are hoping that we could be smarter on the species, unlike smutgrass, and by using maybe AI, we should be able to be a few steps ahead of the species before it spreads everywhere in the state. While we have these two species which are quite difficult to control and eradicate, as Dr. Sellett said, and then we tend to wake up now to Australian beardgrass, which also seems to be a new species, but not so new because it's been around for some time, but it's new to us, it's new to our land, and it needs attention. And our main aim and our main focus is to try and remove or try and help producers to reduce the species in their pastures. So invasive species as a whole, the three and the many others that Dr. Sellers has already mentioned, species that are called invasive mainly because they have been introduced in that particular area. Australian beardgrass was introduced in the United States in the early 19th century, and it was introduced as a forage crop. Unfortunately, due to its unpalatability, it was unsuccessful and producers were not very pleased with the species. Invasive species tend to be competitive with native species, and this could cause extinction of native species and displacement. They compete for nutrients and they tend to survive in poor environments, that is low fertility, low pH. And Florida, being so hot and humid, provides quite a suitable environment for most of these species, and it allows them to grow aggressively and to be vigorous, enable them to be able now to outcompete our native species. Also, they tend to be quite vigorous when it comes to reproduction. Most of these species, including Cogon grass and Australian beardgrass, they reproduce by both rhizomes and seeds, and that allows them to be able to disperse either ground or on aerial or above the ground. And then they are also causing a lot of ecosystem problems. For example, since they are displaying our native species, this then disturbs our ecosystem and food webs and other ecosystem services that we are receiving from native species. And this causes a lot of problems, especially economic losses. As Dr. Sellers has said, invasive species in the United States, they incur losses of approximately $138 billion annually, with Florida incurring $179 million annually. And this shows the extent of the damage caused by invasive species. And also economic losses are not just in terms of money or monetary. You also find that your aesthetic, as the photo that I showed earlier on, you are losing your aesthetic in the environment because they are not pleasant species ideally. And they are also invading your pastures, reducing their value and reducing the amount of feed that will be available to your livestock or to your cows. And more than that, you are incurring costs in trying to buy supplementary food and trying to control these weeds. So Australian beardgrass originated from Australia, from New Zealand, from Eurasia, from Africa, including Eswatini. It was introduced to South, Central, and North America in the 19th century, with the first report in Florida dating back to 1940, where it was used as a forage species in an experiment in Gainesville. But since 1979, the species has been seen in roadsides, pastures, and other undisturbed land in Florida, and has been found to have spread to 9 counties or more. The Florida Invasive Species Council has named Australian beardgrass as a high invasion risk species, which means that it is capable to overthrow or to overtake the entire land, causing a lot of damage to the environment. Additionally, the the UF IFAS has developed a plant assessment tool which helps us to predict the distribution of invasive species, and they have managed to determine that Australian beardgrass has spread to other counties, including the Martin and Broward County. And this was stated back in 2023. The map that we have here was last updated in 2021, and we do believe that the species has spread to other counties, and for that reason, it is quite important for us to know more about it and try to control it. How does the species look like? So Australian beardgrass is a tuft perennial grass that is almost 3 feet high or 35 inches high. It grows throughout the year. The best way to identify it is through its leaves because it has quite a noticeable midrib, and when you touch it, it's a bit thick. It has hairs where on the leaf sheath, especially where the stem and the leaf meet. The leaves have a distinct unpleasant aroma, especially when you crush them or when you are mowing your yard. But one interesting character or feature is that during the summer season, I think the heat in Florida and the humidity allows the leaves to excrete whatever substance, and you do not really need to crush or touch the leaves. You can smell the aroma or the aroma even from a distance or when you are around the species. And then Australian beardgrass is well known for its purple red seed head, which are quite large because it contains spikelets that are more than 7 and can reach up to 15. Initially, it starts off as a green spikelet, and at maturity, it becomes purple. On the left, we have another side of the very same field, which we showed earlier on, showing how your field looks like when you have Australian beardgrass. It also has the seeds also have hairs which enable its dispersal, and this allows it to be quite invasive and to reach other areas of greater distances. It flowers in fall or in the late summer towards fall, that is from August to November, but it's not uncommon for one to observe seed heads in the summer, especially if we didn't have a mild winter, or if we had a mild winter, sorry. As Jaxoceles has mentioned that though the species is now in Florida, it was introduced to other parts to the US, and other researchers have attempted to control the species. So research in Kansas State, they used 2 herbicides, glyphosate and imazapar, where they applied glyphosate at 3 rates and imazapar at 2 rates. They controlled Australian beardgrass in different species, both warm season grass species and cool season grass species. But warm season grass species are of interest to us because those are the predominant species that we have in Florida. So their results showed that Australian beardgrass control was from 42% to 75% with glyphosate. However, these rates injured the warm season species, which was undesirable because it means they destroyed whatever species or forage species that we are interested in growing. Whereas imazapar at 16 ounces provided 99% control while causing less injury, which is preferable, while 20 ounces had the highest control, which was 100%, but also had a higher injury compared to 16 ounces, which was then now undesirable. With this research, it provided a starting point for our own research. However, we have seen glyphosate and we know glyphosate capabilities, we felt that the glyphosate rates that they used were quite high, especially because they also completely injured the warm season species that we were interested in. So we thought if maybe we could lower the glyphosate rates, we could probably get similar or better results because, as I've said, we know glyphosate capabilities. And therefore, for our own study, we applied glyphosate at 2 lower rates, which were 11 and 22 ounces. And then we applied imazapar at 8, 16, and 32 ounces per acre. It's worth noting that even though the earlier researchers just applied using imazapar glyphosate, we thought we could also trial other herbicides that we know that are efficacious to other invasive species, including hexazinon, imazapyc, and method. And unfortunately, all those herbicides did not provide any tangible data that we could present. So we just went ahead with imazapyr and glyphosate. And I would also like to point that imazapyr and glyphosate are two different herbicides that have different persistence when it's in the soil, and therefore they are going to provide different results at a particular duration. So we conducted our study in Lake Bakla in Florida in May 2024. And then we collected our data from an Beardgrass pasture that was infested with Australian beardgrass. As you saw in the earlier pictures, our initial evaluation showed that there was an Australian beardgrass cover of more than 85%. So our results showed that imazapyr at 8 ounces had the lowest control for Australian beardgrass, which was below 50%. Ideally, you would want your control to be at least 50% for your first application, while the other rates of both imazapyr and glyphosate provided better control or more than 50% control at 60 days. However, this was transient, as we see at 150 days. Only imazapyr at 32 ounces and glyphosate at 22 ounces were able to maintain their control above 50%. And then we also evaluated beardgrass injury, and we noted that imazapyr at 8 ounces and glyphosate at 11 ounces only caused less than 20% injury to beardgrass, which was quite desirable. But then, however, as we observed earlier on, their control was really low. But then in glyphosate managed to cause less than 50% damage. Glyphosate at 22 ounces managed to cause less than 50% injury to beardgrass, while the 32 ounces of imazapyr caused more than 50%, reaching almost 80% of beardgrass injury. And we can see that in this picture where one of the plots that were applied with 32 ounces of imazapyr, you can see that there are patches on the field. You have almost complete death of beardgrass, which is quite undesirable, but I would like to highlight that this was just at 60 days after spraying. At 150 days, when we went to do our evaluation, there was no beardgrass injury, mainly because beardgrass is quite a hardy species. It's able to recover quickly. But I would also like to mention that if ever a producer is worried about these patches, of which I would be worried too, because such patches are now going to allow invasion of other species or other invasive species such as cogon grass, smart grass, which is then going to cause new problems in your field, which you do not really want. We do suggest that they could apply or they could fertilize the area because that's then going to increase the competitive ability of beardgrass and increase the recovery rate. In our Cogon grass study, we noted that we also applied imazapar at similar rates, and we noted that the Bahia grass was still injured at 150 days. So we went out and fertilized half of the plot just to try and enhance Bahia grass growth. And when we went back to evaluate at 360 days, we noted that the area where we fertilized had had better Bahia grass coverage compared to the unfertilized area. So which is a practice that we would want to encourage farmers to do because they do not want to have new species. And at the bottom, we have a picture showing how the Bahia grass looked like from receiving 22 ounces of glyphosate, just showing some minor injuries, though above 20%, but not as bad as 32 ounces of imazapar. Later on, at 150 days, we went on to evaluate Australian beardgrass cover, of which we noted that the two lower rate of imazapar had actually more Australian beardgrass than we initially started with. So this shows that even though this actually shows that the control that we saw earlier on was quite transient because we ended up having more of the population we started with than we would like to have. And then on the other side of imazapar, 32 ounces and both glyphosate rate, we noted that these rates were able to reduce Australian beardgrass cover by up to 80%, and 32 ounces of imazapar reduced Australian beardgrass by reduced it to less than 40%, which was quite desirable. And this reduction was also confirmed by the stunting of Australian beardgrass that we observed in the field. And this was quite great to observe because at 150 days, as I mentioned, that we no longer had Bahia grass injury, and this actually allowed now the Bahia grass to grow and become competitive and to increase its cover so that Australian beardgrass does not really have an opportunity to grow. So we have pictures from the cover. On the other side, we can tell that this is where the plot ends. You can tell that we have more of Australian beardgrass in the field and less Bahia grass. And it turns out that this is actually more than what we initially started with. And on the second picture, we can see, or we can have like similar observations. But now at 115 for 32 ounces of imazapar, you can tell that we are having less Australian beardgrass and we are having more of Bahia grass, which is quite preferred, and we are very excited about these observations. And then when you come to glyphosate, you can tell that we can ignore this one, it's smart grass. You can tell that you are having a bit of Bahia grass now growing back. And the same can be said with 22 ounces of glyphosate. You are having a bit more of Bahia grass, and we had less of Australian beardgrass than we initially started with. So in conclusion, we can say that imazapar managed to control and reduce Australian beardgrass cover, especially at 150 days. This is an ongoing experiment, and we are hoping to make evaluations at 365 days just to observe how these two herbicides are behaving and how Bahia grass is also behaving. And both glyphosate rates provided great control to Australian beardgrass, and this was exciting because we used lower rate of glyphosate compared to the Kansas study, and therefore farmer or producers can be able to use lower rates while reducing costs. The trial as I have said, it's ongoing. We also managed to set up another one in November on the same location. So it will be interesting to see the control of Australian beardgrass between these two application timings. And since we are dealing with an invasive species, we are hoping to do sequential applications, just like we are doing in our common grass study, where one of the trials is in its second year now. So we are hoping to go back and spray in May, and the same is going to apply to the one we applied in November. And then for this specific species, since it is quite new, we are hoping that we will be able to help producers identify the species correctly, because it is not just it's not just a new species, it also has lookalike species of which we do not want farmers to miss on the actual species thinking it's another species. So correct identification is going to help us control the weed species early, which brings me to the other point that scouting for weeds is quite important on a regular basis for producers, because that is going to allow you to identify and to know the weed species that you have in your field on time, and you'll be able to control your weed species before they invade or they cause a lot of harm in your field. We are also suggesting that producers could try and control species, not just Australian beardgrass, any other weed species, and even the other invasive species we have highlighted early when they are still establishing, because from our cogon grass, we noted that controlling an early establishing patch of an invasive species, it's quite easy compared to controlling a well-established patch, which has maybe 5 years, 3 years plus, while controlling an early establishing one, which is just 1 year. It's easier and it's cheaper because you're going to use less of the chemical. If you do find yourself having to deal with and now a fully established weed species, we still do encourage that you control, because as I have said in the introduction, these species, they are causing more harm in the environment more than in your pasture. Okay, this project is part of the crop protection and pest management extension implementation program, and it's funded by the USDA. If you look on further on the right, you can tell that these objectives quite directed to other species, including Australian beardgrass, and we are hoping that we will be able to assess and document efficacy of herbicides to control the species. We are also hoping to have extension officers to come on board to do more research, especially with identification and controlling the species. And not just extension officers, we are also hoping that producers are going to come on board and we can all be able to control the species together. So therefore, we are grateful to the USDA for funding this project. I would also like to thank Dr. Salas for his mentorship and for all the opportunities that he provides me with. I'll also like to thank Blake Tinsley, who is our biological scientist. He did all the work maneuvering up on Australian beardgrass pasture that smells awfully. He did a great job there. And if you have any questions, you can contact me or Dr. Salas. We also have more information on the university website on all the other species that we are working on. And with that, I am going to take questions. Okay, I'm going to repeat the question for those online. Marquise is asking if we could do a combination of glyphosate and imazapyr on a localized application for for Australian beardgrass control. Honestly, I do not think that will be quite beneficial because the herbicides on their own, they are able to provide substantial control. So in combining them could lead to maybe an antagonistic effect, which we do not really want. Okay, I know you have a follow-up question. No, they can't. No, they can't compensate each other. Okay, Namrata is asking, why did we choose glyphosate and imizapar? As I mentioned earlier, when we started out the experiment in Lake Bakla, we initially had 10 treatments. Those treatments included hexazinon, which is a herbicide we are using in smart grass. And then we also had imazapyr, not imazapar, and then we had sulfuron, and then we had method, which are other herbicides known to be able to control other difficult to control invasive species, but these herbicides did not do anything to Australian beardgrass. So when we went back to the field, only the plots that were sprayed with imizapyr and glyphosate gave us results. And that is why then at the end we have this. Yes, Shao. Okay, for Australian beardgrass, when we applied in May, it was still at its vegetative stage. It had not reached reproduction. Yes. But when we applied in November, it had fully flowered. I think what you are, okay, Joe is asking if we could probably reduce the height of Australian beardgrass, mow it or overgraze the area before applying the herbicides at a lower rate. That is possible, but what we observed with smart grass was that applying the herbicide after mowing a grazing does not benefit bahia grass at the end of the day. So we could do it, but because then it's a different species, yes, but our experience with smart grass doesn't really help. Okay. Did we have cats? Some, yeah. Yeah, because I think at vegetation, they're just grazing almost everything that's there. But when it had fully flowered, they couldn't. Yeah. Okay, I think someone raised their hand here. I don't know if their hand is still up. If it's still up, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Yeah. Good presentation, by the way. Good work. Like, it is not like a question per se. It's just like something that I'm kind of worried about. I just wanted to ask, like, considering that, like, there is a rise of cryptic species, like, and then, like, in terms of identifying that particular species, which is a weed in this case, are you guys planning maybe like to develop like a taxonomic key, which is going to help the farmers or which is going to help someone not in the scientific field to easily identify that particular weed?
Okay, Lungelo, thank you for your question. In this project, we are working with Mark Frank, who is an extension botanist. So I think he's the one that is going to help us establish that database.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, so before we depart, I have a couple of announcements for you all. First, I would like to welcome you to come back in April on the 15th for Dr. Philippe Moriel's Ona Highlight, Heat Stress in Pregnant Beef Cows. And as always, whenever I send you this recording, I will include the link to register for this event. I will also include a link that will give you access to Dr. Sellers and Tenzy's Ona report for January, which was about the Australian beardgrass. So this is a flyer for 2 dates and events for Managing Cattle Enterprises for Success. The one on March 20th, if you would like to attend that in Pasco County, if you register by the 13th, which is 7 days before the event date, you will get a special price of $15. They still have some room available, so if you're possibly interested in attending that, you will want to check out this flyer. And then the next event is going to be April 24th, and that one's going to be held in Hillsborough County. Our next field day is scheduled for the 17th of April, and early registration ends on Friday. And at that time, the day after, the price is going to go up to $30. So if you would like to attend, be sure to register. Also, any students are welcome to register up until Friday for free. And any UF faculty or staff can register for free up until Friday. So be sure and take advantage of that. If you've never been to the center, it is an excellent time to visit, to be able to meet all of the faculty, staff, and students, learn about all the exciting research that we're doing, as well as being able to visit field sites and enjoy a wonderful steak lunch provided by the Cloverleaf Foundation of Hardy County. Another event that registration opens in April is our Youth Field Day, which is scheduled for June 5th. The program activities will be the same as last year, with a morning learning expo from 8 to 10, and then class rotations from 10 to 2. And new this year, students who are ages 8 to 18 that complete the program are going to qualify. They're going to receive Beef Quality Assurance Certification. So that's a really awesome opportunity, and I hope if you don't have children that could take part in this, that you could share this event with them. And if you're not already doing so, we invite you to follow us on social media. And if you do not receive our Friday e-news, send me an email to the address shown on the screen, and I will be happy to sign you up so that you can hear about all the awesome things that are going on week to week and learn about events that you might want to register for. So again, thank you so much for attending today's Ona Highlight, and we hope to see you next month.